Good evening. My name is Amanda Knief, and I am the director of the lectures program here at Iowa State. Tonight's event is part of the campaign series in 2019. The Committee on Lectures and the lectures program is nonpartisan and does not endorse candidates for office. The Committee on Lectures does sponsor and publicize appearances by candidates and public officials from across the political spectrum in accordance with its goals of providing the university community with opportunities to question candidates before the Iowa caucuses. There will be a Q&A tonight. Please use the microphone in the center of the room to ask your questions. With a rallying cry of go big, be bold, and do good, Eric Swalwell is putting his experience and his new energy to work for all Americans. Eric, 38, is serving his 4th term representing California's 15th congressional district. He was born in Iowa and spent his early years in Algona, where his father served as police chief before the family eventually settled in Dublin, California. He served as a county prosecutor and as a city councilman before winning his House seat in 2012, defeating a 40-year incumbent. As co-chair of the Democratic Steering and Policy Committee, Eric helps set the caucus's policy agenda and oversees committee assignments. As founder and chairman emeritus of Future Forum, he has been the House Democrats' point person on outreach to millennials, the nation's biggest, most diverse, and best educated generation. As chairman of the Intelligence Modernization and Readiness Subcommittee of the House Intelligence Committee, he plays a key role in keeping our nation safe. And as a Judiciary Committee member, he is an outspoken voice for upholding the rule of law and equity for all. He is very busy. In all of these roles, Eric Swalwell is fighting to bring the promise of America to all Americans. If you work hard, your blood, sweat, tears should add up to you doing better for yourself and dreaming bigger for your kids. Please help me give a warm Iowa State welcome to Eric Swalwell.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Iowa State. Thank you, Amanda, for that introduction. Thank each and every one of you for joining us here tonight. This is my first visit back to Iowa, back to where I was born, since announcing earlier in the week that I'm running for president. And it's thrilling to be here, and it's also just thrilling to be on a college campus because so many of your issues are the issues that I care deeply about and am fighting for today. I just want to tell you a few things before we get started. First, meet my wife, Brittany. Brittany's with us today. This is like a vacation for both of us. Our kids are at home, so we're actually going to get sleep tonight. 2 kids under 2, so this, I think she's going to be on the road with me a lot more once we see how much sleep we get. I also want to introduce to you, and you're hearing it from us first, we're so proud to announce that we have an Iowa State chair, someone who will be leading us as we pick up caucus goers, make our case across the state, and that is Vicki Brown, who is the Waterloo Democratic Club chair, and someone who knows these caucuses, knows the people of Iowa, knows what they care about, and I want to introduce Vicki to you. Thank you so much, Vicki. And Vicki is fresh off a special Senate election win in the Waterloo, Cedar Rapids, Cedar Falls area. So you helped us make sure that we held that Democratic seat just a few weeks ago, and we're looking forward to just mobilizing and getting across the state with your leadership. Thank you so much, Vicki. So I'm all in, and I want to hear from you tonight about what you care about. But I first want to just thank many of you because you did a lot of work in the last few months, right before the midterms, to make sure that what we care about on healthcare, what we care about on taxpayer dollars going to education and transportation and not tax cuts for the wealthiest is protected, and that what we care about when it comes to putting a balance of power on abuses of power is put in place. And so with your energy, we were able to elect 2 new Iowans to Congress. Iowa made history, the first 2 women ever to serve in the United States Congress, in Cindy Axne and Abby Finkenauer, and that is because of the work that you've done. And as someone who's had to live the last 2 years in Washington, D.C., I can just tell you, by giving us the majority, by putting Speaker Pelosi behind President Trump as he gave the State of the Union this year, you've cut our time in hell in half. Just imagine what it would be like if we didn't have the majority. But I came here today, though, to talk to you about not only what we can protect, but if we keep the House, if we win the Senate and put a Democrat behind that desk in the White House, we can actually start advancing values that will make all of our lives better. Advancing the promise of America to all Americans. And Amanda talked about it a little bit earlier. And to me, the promise is simple. No matter who you are, who you love, who you worship, where you're from, if you work hard, that blood, sweat, and tears should add up to doing better for yourself and dreaming bigger for your kids. It's something I learned about here in Iowa. I was born in northwestern Iowa. My dad was a cop. My mom, she made dollhouses in our garage, baked wedding cakes in the kitchen, raised 4 boys, and in our living room had a pretty large but probably unlicensed daycare facility with kids just running around everywhere. But their simple dream for me was that that hard work would add up to their firstborn son to going off and being the first in the family to go to college. And so I saw them chase that dream all over the country. We moved from Iowa to Oregon, up and down California, and they put me to work as soon as I was able. So I knew the value of hard work. At age 9, I was on a paper route. And you can learn a lot about where the promise of America is being fulfilled on a paper route. I'd ride my bike and I'd see on my route there were big houses and there were small ones. There were houses with 2 new cars and houses with none. And many times I'd see people who were just getting home from work as I was starting my route at 6 a.m. in the morning. And those were usually the people who didn't even get the paper at all. They weren't seeing the promise of America fulfilled for them. And for me, on Sunday mornings, I'd circle the real estate listings and put them at the breakfast table in front of my parents, hoping that they'd see a home that we could afford to buy so we wouldn't have to move again. Between grandparents' houses and aunts and uncles' houses, and just picking up, breaking friendships, making new pen pals, starting new schools. I wanted that dream of home ownership to be fulfilled for them, mostly so I didn't have to change new schools. And when I was 14, we rooted ourselves in the San Francisco Bay Area. They were able to buy a home, represented stability. And I kept working. Went to college on a soccer scholarship, then to law school, and came back home and worked as a prosecutor in Oakland, California. And again in that job, I saw the promise of America was not reaching all Americans. I'd sit in a West Oakland apartment building. I remember talking to a homicide witness, a young black man who had lost a young black friend who was 17 years old right out in front of his school a week before he was to graduate. And I remember then hearing the piercing sounds of police sirens outside, looking across the street and seeing payday lenders and liquor stores, and hearing about the crumbling schools where the best technology was an overhead projector, just sensing that it didn't matter how hard this young man worked, didn't matter how smart he was. If we didn't invest in his community, if we didn't believe in his God-given potential, promise of America was not going to reach him. I got elected to Congress at the age of 31. At first, I was mostly just the IT help desk to my more senior colleagues, setting up Facebook accounts and helping people turn off their phones in committee hearings. I was okay at doing that, but I wanted to take the next generation of members of Congress out across the country to listen to, learn from, and stand up for this booming millennial and Gen Z group. So I started a group called Future Forum. Went to over 50 cities. And what I saw on this tour was a generation who had fulfilled that promise of making sure that they went to college, but were finding themselves in student debt. I saw so many hollowed out communities where the best export was a young person who went away to college, would get skills that were important, but would never come back home. Saw that especially here in Iowa. Wouldn't come back home because there weren't any jobs here, no infrastructure here, and you just see the pain and the heartbreak of the families to see their child succeed, but not to be able to see him come back home and raise their family nearby. On a paper route, at a courthouse, across the country, leading the next generation of members of Congress, seeing that promise of America not reach all Americans. What I see are so many people now, teachers and truckers, nurses, just running in place. Wages are flat. Healthcare costs are eating up your paychecks. 80% of us are living paycheck to paycheck. 40 million of us with student loan debt. That promise of America is broken in too many places. So I'm running for president because I think the way to fulfill it for every person is to go big on the issues we take on. Healthcare, education, gun violence. Be bold with the solutions we offer. And do good in the way that we treat each other and the way that our leaders govern. Go big, be bold, do good. On healthcare, I believe that we need to have a coverage for all plan. A healthcare guarantee. If you're sick, you're seen. If you're seen, you don't go broke. I've gone across Western Iowa. I went with J.D. Schulten when he was running against Steve King. And he showed me at the Casey's General Store the hollowed out candy jars with a flyer of someone's face who'd gotten sick in the community. In the United States of America, that cannot be our healthcare plan. The charity of a stranger at a checkout stand. We're too rich of a nation. We're too kind of a nation. We can do better. So my plan would be coverage for all with the public option. To drive down the costs on the private insurers, expand access so every person can get covered, but also challenge the country in that spirit of going so big, being so bold, and doing such good, to find cures in our lifetime. Imagine if we had taken just half of the $1 trillion+ tax cut, where 83% of the benefits went to 1% of Americans. What if we just took half and had a 10-year cures campaign to invest in genomics so we know what we're predisposed to, invest in targeted therapies so if it actually happens, we can treat it immediately, and invest in data sharing as we have different clinical trials. So the more we know, the more we can target those therapies. Bring down the cost that way. Expand the quality of life that way. And create a lot of new jobs in the life sciences. I'll tell you, I've got a friend who's 37 years old. Known him for 15 years. He's got 3 beautiful little girls. He's a prosecutor. Told me last year he has ALS. He could ask anything of me. I'd do it. He's asked nothing. He doesn't have time to wait for Washington. He's out on his own with his own GoFundMe, his own nonprofit organization. And he reflects a generation that has given up in believing that Washington can be an advocate in our healthcare. I want to be a generational bridge of optimism and inventiveness to go big on this issue, not just coverage, but cures. When it comes to education, 40 million people, $1.3 trillion in student debt. I'm paying off just under $100,000 today. My wife knew this before we got married, so don't feel bad for her. She had full disclosure, and she married me anyway. But I see a generation that is deferring their dreams. The least home-owning generation America's ever seen. The least entrepreneurial generation, taking a good idea, turning it into a business. My proposal is this. On student loans, I would do two things immediately. Lead the Congress and sign a bill that would bring the interest rate to 0. The government should not make a penny on the interest of recent graduates. I've also been working in Congress in a bipartisan way with legislation that would allow employers to contribute tax-free to their employees' student loan debt. And when it comes to college, because if you're a student today, you're wondering, what about the high tuition that I'm paying? Or if you have a kid on their way to college, you're looking at the planning and wondering, how is this going to pencil out? I would do two things for future and current college students. One, offer a college bargain. If you work, study through school, and then get out, take your first job, and do volunteer service hours on the side for a community that needs it, we'll give you a debt-free education. If you work through college, college should work for you. But in any case, the federal government, once and for all, should leverage our lending. 90% of the student loan debt out there is federally backed. But we treat Corinthian College, Iowa State University, Trump University, we treat them all the same. What I will do is look at the metrics. If you're a college that is graduating students within 4 years, placing them in jobs within 6 months, keeping tuition down year after year, and keeping administrator salaries within what's reasonable. And by the way, there's a public university not too far from here whose last president made $7 million a year. If you're a good actor on those measurements, you're most eligible for student loan aid. If you're a bad actor, you're less eligible. I think that would have the states kick in more money, have the institutions put forward better curriculum, and make it more affordable so you have more money in your pockets to realize those dreams. Go big, be bold, do good. Finally, top priority for me will be ending gun violence in America. I launched my campaign 2 nights ago at Parkland. Brought together families who had lost their kids or parent. Mothers whose children were killed, but names we never knew, stories were never told because they died in a city or died as a result of gang violence. I'm just convinced, after talking to the students, after talking to the moms, that your right to hug your child when she comes home, to dance at a concert, pray at church, shop at the mall, laugh at a theater, is greater than any other right in the Constitution, period. And we should start reflecting that with the laws that we pass in Washington. And I don't accept anymore that this is a divisive issue. I do accept that there is a vocal, tweeting, shouting, bullying minority on this issue, but I'm not afraid of them. And you're not either. We're inspired by students who saw 17 people on their campus killed, picked themselves up out of their grief, organized, marched on the town squares, marched to the town halls, and then marched on the ballot boxes and beat 17 NRA-endorsed candidates. On this issue, let's have no fear. And we're already making progress. We passed background checks last month in the United States Congress. And guess what? It wasn't controversial because 73% of NRA members also support background checks. But to end school shootings, but also the fear that our children learn in today, I'm the only candidate in this race proposing that we ban and buy back the 15 million assault weapons across America. We can do that. I'm inspired by Australia doing that in the 90s. 35 people killed. They banned and bought back 700,000 assault weapons. 0 mass shootings since. I'm inspired by New Zealand. They're still grieving. Their dead were just buried. And they voted yesterday 119-1 to ban assault weapons. But I also believe we need to invest in mental health services, not just to prevent the next school shooting, because I talked to too many kids today in high schools and college, and they're filled with anxiety and stress. And that's if their school was never affected by a school shooting. We need to understand what young people are going through today, the stress on performing academically, going into these uncertain industries and economies. Go big, be bold, do good. If we do that on healthcare, if we do that on education, if we do that to end gun violence, we can start to bring that promise of America to all Americans. And by doing good, I mean recognizing that we're not the enemies of each other that this president wants us to be. I'm the son of 2 Republicans. I married a Hoosier from southern Indiana. I go on Fox News just so my parents can see me on TV. And I get to brief the president directly. But I also believe we can't dismiss people who for good reason wanted higher wages, lower healthcare costs, and a brighter future for their kids. I've pledged that as president, I'll put together a blended cabinet, Republicans and Democrats, not because it'll be easy, it'll be hard. But I think with a team of rivals, and yes, we may have to send out a search party to find Republicans who will put country over party, but with a team of rivals, you'll have the credibility to make the democratic reforms that we need, that have been exposed with the president who leads with graft and corruption and nepotism. An era of reformation unlike anything we've seen since Watergate. But we also have to make structural changes to our democracy. Scrub out the dirty maps and the dirty money. I will push Congress to pass independent redistricting in every single state in America, just like you do in Iowa, just like we do in California. And I will push Congress to pass a stripping down to the studs of the Citizens United ruling, to require every corporation to disclose to their shareholders money that they're spending in our elections to silence your voices. And I believe in that spirit of going big, being bold, and doing good, that we should seek to have publicly financed campaigns in our lifetime to truly take the influence of money out of our politics. So that's why I'm here. Please find one of our organizers. We've got many of them here. We've got Jacob and Kesh. I see Michelle and Fatima. And let's protect in the next 2 years what Franklin Roosevelt called the 4 freedoms. The freedom of speech, the freedom of worship, the freedom from fear, and the freedom from want. All have had a wrecking ball taken to them. Press, they're declared the enemy of the American people. A Muslim ban in place for a country whose symbol is a Statue of Liberty. Freedom from fear, it should really be freedom from fear-mongering, because you're told to be afraid of a new scaravan every single week, because the people that are coming here in need of shelter and food don't look like you. And the freedom from want, well, those tax cuts to pay for them, proposals now from the president to raid Social Security and Medicare accounts that you work so hard to pay into. Let's restore those 4 freedoms. But in that spirit of going big, being bold, and doing good, let's add a fifth freedom, a uniquely American freedom, the freedom to dream. The dream that my parents dreamed for me in Iowa, when they believed that if they worked hard, I could be the first in the family to go to college. The dream that every Ames family dreams for their kids. That if you're free to learn, free from discrimination, free to drink clean water, breathe clean air, free from violence, and if you're some 9-year-old riding your little bike around, freezing your little face off, and looking at the biggest house on the block, and believing that your hard work could add up to living in that house one day, then you're free to dream. That's the promise of America, not yet fulfilled for all Americans. But if we link arms and come together, going big, being bold, and doing good, we can bring that promise to all Americans. That's why I'm running for president, and that's why I'd love to hear from you on how we can do it. Thank you. Yes, please. There's the mic right there. And if you want to line up behind the microphone, if you have a question.
I think you know this from the time that you spent in Iowa with Cindy Axne and J.D. Scholten and Abby Finkenauer and the guy that was already in there. But my question for you is, how do you propose to campaign and how do you propose to speak to rural Iowa?
Yeah. I will go west of I-35, and I was just there a week ago in Algona, where my dad was a police chief. And I recognize that we have to win rural voters back. We have to win farmers back who've been devastated by this economy. They've been devastated by a reckless tariff policy that rightfully understands the predatory practices of China, but incompetently is going it alone without any other victim countries who we could band together with to make this case and not hurt our soybean and hog farm farmers. Andrea took me out last year. We went to a farm and talked to a soybean farmer. And what he told me, I'll never forget. He said, look, I can probably weather this for a little while, but bank's not going to lend to me if I'm going into a second year of not being able to show a profit. And that's hurting our farmers. And market consolidation is also hurting our farmers. It's hurting the competition that they need, to buy their seed and to buy their feed. And when there's fewer options, the cost goes up for them. And so, making sure that we have a Department of Justice that enforces, antitrust law is important to me as well. But I will be a candidate who can add votes in states in the general election, born in Iowa, educated in the South, married to a Hoosier, and elected in a very diverse part of the country. I feel that I can tell people, I see you, I hear you, and because of the way I lived, because of the way I live now as a father of 2 kids, paying off student loan debt, I'm for you. Thank you. Yes, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
What's your name?
My name's Luke.
Hey, Luke. Do you go here?
Yeah, I do. I'm actually a senior here.
Cool.
Yeah, it's good to meet you, Barry.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks a ton for coming.
Of course.
I'm really glad you're here.
What are you studying?
I'm a senior in animal ecology and environmental studies.
Okay.
And that all kind of makes sense with my question. So, so there is an issue that I know you didn't touch on, and that is climate change. And it's something that a lot of students, as well as staff and faculty here at the university, as well as a lot of people within the Ames community, are very concerned about, especially with how, so someone my age, knowing how much it'll affect me, as well as my children in the future. And so recently at Iowa State, with the help of our sustainability department and student government, we passed a resolution to get Iowa State to transition to renewable energy, electricity by 2035.
That's great.
And so we have to present that to our president here soon. And so, with that being said, I just want to know, where exactly do you rank fighting climate change on your list of priorities if you are to become president? And then with that, if it is a priority of yours, then how do you plan to have our country, which due to the recent administration is now the largest producer of fossil fuels in the world? So how do you plan for our country to reclaim ourselves as a leader in advancing the transition to renewable energy?
Yeah, so I'm unapologetically a supporter of the Green New Deal. But more importantly, on day one, I'm going to take the oath, get on a plane. I'm going to go on a global affirmation tour. Not just for our mutual defense agreements with NATO and South Korea and Japan and Australia, but to look all of the countries' leaders in the eyes and tell them, we want to be back at the table for a climate accord, and propose that we host a climate summit in the United States to have the next iteration of the Paris Climate Agreement. So I think first we have to approach this globally, but second, green the economy. So I see it as an opportunity with infrastructure dollars to invest in wind, solar, alternative fuel sources, as well as fusion. In my district, we're investing heavily in inertial confinement fusion. Russia and China are doing that. That would be one of the cleanest sources of energy. Here's the challenge, though. We have to make sure that no longer is there a false choice for a worker where they're told, especially a pipeline worker, a pipe fitter, a laborer, where they're told you have to decide between your job, feeding your family, and addressing clean air and clean water. And here's how I'd do that. I would deploy technologies to the fossil fuel extraction work sites. Carbon sequestration, carbon capture, carbon reuse. Bring those sites down to carbon neutral so those workers can keep working and getting a paycheck. I would make sure that the younger workers who are going to have a longer runway in their career have a skills bridge that we could have fossil fuel companies pay into so that they can get the skills for these new renewable economies, so that they can transition into them, but also expect if we have public investments in those economies that they're going to have high labor standards so that these are not just non-union jobs that don't pay much. And then third, what I would really expect to do is make sure that in our infrastructure bill, it's a public investment with a project labor agreement so that you have local hire in the areas that are going to have their economies green. That way, you get rid of that false choice. And if we do it right, addressing climate change won't start an argument. It'll start a lot of people's work days. That's how we'll get there. Thanks for the question.
Thanks.
Good luck to you as you graduate. Yep. Thank you. Yep. Thank you.
Well,
How you doing?
my name is, how close to you? If I get the right distance here? Okay. My name is Lance, and I'm retired. And
What'd you do, Lance?
Excuse me?
What did you do before you retired?
I actually hate to tell you this, but I worked for a freight railroad, but my passion was always passenger trains.
Oh, sure.
And the only train to Iowa, by the way, avoids all the major cities. We have one across the state, follows Highway 34. It's called the California Zephyr. It's very popular, very comfortable.
That'll be
And
our
up in-
campaign code name.
Excuse me?
That'll be our campaign code name, California Zephyr.
Well, are you familiar with it?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, maybe you're from California?
Yes.
I should tell you one thing, and I'm sorry to take this time up here,
Yeah.
but you know the San Joaquin Valley, right?
Yes.
They had a train there. It was 3 cars called the San Joaquin. It goes down to Bakersfield, Merced, and Fresno, and that had 5,000 riders on it in 1972. They were going to knock that train off, and the state of California took it over and made some investments in that. And the ridership, I think, I'm not sure of this, it's over 1 million today. It's 18 trains, fleet, and you started a high-speed rail act, which is really a highway job, by the way, because with high-speed rail,
Yeah.
you eliminate all the dangerous crossings,
Yeah.
which is a great idea if you're sitting there in front of a train that on tracks that were built in 1850. And I just want somebody who's going to invest in rail. And if you're going to talk about climate change, you've got to talk about rail.
Yeah.
And we have major corridors in Iowa, Iowa City to Cedar Rapids, Ames, Des Moines. They're putting in billions in this I-35 down here to Des Moines instead of a single track.
Yeah.
And you really don't need high speed. You need any speed because we have all these restricted, curves on these dangerous road beds. And the ridership was very high. It was at the highest until Trump got to be president. And right now they're attacking the national rail system. They want to shut down the handful of trains that we have.
So let me tell you, Lance, what I'd do on rail. I would invest in rail, and I would reject the argument that in some cases It's a train to nowhere, because you're not somewhere until you connect nowhere to other communities. And it's a story I know personally.
That corridor out there is not a failure.
That's right.
It's over 1 million passengers.
Yeah.
And they're a fleet of trains, and they made some very sensible investments like stopping the train where people want to go. Amtrak goes right by amusement parks, airports, malls. It even avoids villages like Des Moines, Fort Wayne, so on. You want to go in there where people want to go, and there isn't a ridership problem. The problem is there's not enough service to meet the demand.
If you want to know what kind of president I'll be on rail, I would invite you to look at my record as a congressman. And my number 1 priority in my district is extending 13 miles from where the BART
What
rail
district are you in?
ends. It's Northern California Congressional District 15. So I'm at the edge of the San Francisco Bay Area, but because of affordability issues, people are moving, like my parents.
How far east do you go?
Livermore is right up Livermore and
You
Tracy.
include Sacramento, or?
No, not that far east. So my top priority, Lance, is connecting my district to the San Joaquin Valley, where people are commuting. I've fought to raise, with partnerships in the community, nearly $750 million for what's a multi-billion-dollar rail project. But I will lead on rail, and I'm doing it already at home. So thank you for bringing that issue forward. Yep. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going, Congressman?
Good. What's your
also
name?
a fellow Californian. My name is Rodney Nickens. Really excited to see you in the
Thanks,
race. Good to see another Californian represented. I'm actually here on behalf of Pack the Courts. I'm the field director for
What's it called?
Pack the Courts.
Okay.
It's
Pack
a
the Courts.
national campaign to restore integrity to our judiciary.
Yes.
And I think we've seen under this administration how important the courts are
Yeah.
to the future of our democracy. And we've seen the damage that has been done with the appointment of this administration's nominees from everything from people who are hard right extremists to people who are vehemently against civil rights. And so I guess my question for you is, do you support court packing? And if not, what will you do if you're elected president to restore integrity to our judiciary?
Yeah, well, I will appoint judges who are qualified. I personally believe that corporations are not people, that money is not speech, and that has had a pulverizing effect on our democracy. And so, looking at where judges have stood on that issue, because if we don't address that, we're going to lose our freedom to choose at the ballot box. Also, when it comes to the Voting Rights Act, we just voted in Congress on H.R. 1 to restore the Voting Rights Act that the Supreme Court knocked out, and that affects more than anyone minority communities who are scrubbed from the polls, who have polling places put into country clubs that are gated, and people who don't live in the gated area have to go and vote there. So I will, sign that into law. But I also want to be upfront with you. I do not support adding justices to the Supreme Court. So I will pack the courts with judges of integrity who are qualified, who I think share the values of our Constitution and our country. But this idea that we're going to add justices to the Supreme Court, frankly, I just see it as an alibi for not being able to win. What I'm going to do is just as I did in the midterms, I'm going to go to Alabama, I'm going to go to Indiana, I'm going to go to Kansas, I'm going to go to Oklahoma, and I promise that those voters share our values, and I'm going to win there. And I don't want us to propose getting rid of the Electoral College or packing the courts or adding seats to the court as a way around winning. You're from California, Oakland Raiders, their motto is just win, baby. If we just win, we'll get the judges we want.
And what about the lower federal courts? Yeah. Would you support expanding the size of the lower federal courts?
I'm open to that. Frankly, I haven't given that consideration, but I'd love to talk to you about that. I certainly want to fill the vacancies that exist in the federal courts, but I'd love to talk to you about that. But just as I'm talking about the Supreme Court, I don't want to add to it. I just want to make sure we have a Democratic president and a Democratic Senate that will put the right justices in it.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you. How you doing?
Mark Lipsham, architect, builder. Thanks.
Hey, Mark. Yeah.
I've been paying attention to a lot of things, and I've noticed that the world has a God we can all agree on. It's called the growth economy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the growth economy grows via consumption. This has caused climate change. It's
Yeah.
caused some very strange things to happen. Things like the growth economy is driven by investors to get the return for the investment. You know, all kinds of strange things have to happen. You get this really competitive world. I'm getting magazines I don't want because the people want the advertising in it. So you take the environment, grind it up, deliver it to my house, and I throw it in the garbage, or recycle it maybe.
Yeah.
Our healthcare crisis is a result of that. We sell everything imaginable to do less exercise, every version of gross, crappy food you can imagine. We don't need healthcare, we need healthy people. How do we get to this point that we don't consume ourselves to death?
It's a great question,
It's a
and a
horrible
university is the
question.
right place to ask a question so big. I'll start with healthcare. Right now, we don't have healthcare; we have sick care.
Yes, exactly.
That's what we have in the
And
United
it's very
States.
profitable.
And so, what I propose on a coverage for all model is that it would cover, as I said, genomics, because the more you know about what you're predisposed to, the better behavior that drives, especially at the early age of life. So your kids you would know if they're predisposed to diabetes, that would drive their diet and their exercise. So making sure we know what our healthcare profile is. Second, on the preventative side, having access to preventative care, but also not being afraid to have nutritional standards in our schools. And you know, First Lady Michelle Obama, led on this, and I think there's a lot more we can do to make sure that at the earliest ages our kids are eating, you know, healthy food.
And make it cool. You know, look what's available. Look what's advertised. It's pizza and hot
Yeah.
wings and French fries, and it's just absolute garbage. I go to the clinic, you know, to do whatever I got to get a checkup or something like that. I look at the people in the waiting room. They got oxygen tanks and scooters. The only thing wrong with them is their crappy diet. They don't exercise. And this has become this point of pride or something, you know, how much sloth you can have, how much crappy food you can eat. Let's sit and watch television. Let's watch other people get exercise.
I think the place to start is
Spectator
school.
Sports.
You
Pardon
know,
me?
It's got to start in the schools. That's where all of your habits are formed.
Well, the other thing has got to be, there's got to be some accountability for the people that promote this. I mean, so the idea is I want to make a whole bunch of money off selling crappy food, but I don't want to pay for health care.
Yeah.
That sort of goes against the whole purpose of making tons of money of selling crappy food. So can we hook these two things together? It's like if you're going to sell soda and sausage, you need to be kicking into health care or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, Mark, I'm with you, and my philosophy is that this is a country of free markets, but there are just some things that free markets cannot address. Healthcare, environment, education. That's too big.
Just people in this
There's
country are
not
not healthy
profit
anymore.
in that. And I would want to inspire the country to believe that making investments there would have a return on investment, which would be a healthier country that has cleaner air and better educated people with the skills they
Isn't
need.
it
in the new
bizarre
economy.
that they're cutting physical education out of the schools? They're cutting arts. They're cutting all
Civics.
the things that make people intelligent and healthy, and we are systematically dumbing everybody down and making them unhealthy. It's very frustrating to watch.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
How you doing?
Good. Thank you for coming.
What's your name?
Rose Caraway.
Hi, Rose.
I teach here at Iowa State.
What do you teach?
The world religion classes, mainly. Also, I work on religion in Latin America, religion and the environment. My question is kind of related to the food question. I've seen some really interesting sustainable development models of food production, you can look at it all around the world, also here in the States. And I'm curious, how would you address this question of food insecurity and how it relates to climate change and how we can really work towards creating resilient local communities? So you mentioned the global angle, which I think is great. To start out, we get in the White House, we kind of recover what we've lost, but also at the local level, how can we deal with this question of sustainable ag, the question of not just organic vegetables, but kind of different ways of thinking about growing and eating food and how we can create sustainable food systems that can respond to climate change with the crisis that we're
Yeah.
dealing with?
I would say first, transparency and labeling that is nationwide. I don't think we can have a state-by-state labeling system. I think you need to know what you're consuming, and that applies also when it looks at like our data security and our privacy. I think the more you know, the better we are all off. As a former city councilman, I also believe, and my city of Dublin, California, benefited greatly under the Obama administration when there was robust community development grant, block grant funding. Because I think allowing communities to compete for what their local needs are, especially when it comes to agriculture, and having the federal government as a partner, can make a real difference. Because your community's need better than Washington does, and your community's need is different in Ames or Western Iowa than the San Francisco Bay Area. And having those community development block grants that go to health, that go to homelessness, that go to diet and nutrition, could make a big difference in a lot of communities. So just giving more funding there and freedom of spending there, I think would go as well a long way. But also just having an environmental protection agency that is funded and can force against polluters and pesticides so that what we eat is healthy.
Yes.
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
How you doing?
Oh, pretty good.
What's your name?
Todd Clint.
Hi, Todd.
First, I want to say I'm from Sac City.
Oh, no way.
So I was excited to hear Sac City in national news and not have the word popcorn ball next to
The
it.
world's largest popcorn ball.
Yes, a big source of pride for all of us from Sac City.
What year were you born?
I was born in '74.
In Sac City?
No, I was born in Sioux City. I moved
Okay.
to Sac City in '77, graduated
Okay.
in '92.
I was born at Loring Hospital in Sac City, and I drove by it last month. It's this little hospital. You probably know it.
I do. Spent
And-
many of my years with scars and.
We have a 5-month-old, and so I drove by it not too long after we had our 5-month-old, which she was born in a big hospital. And I thought, the day she was born, probably 10 other babies were born, like that day, maybe more. I think I might have been like the only baby born that month at Little Loring Hospital.
Anymore, I don't think. There's so few.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you and I share, I watched some of your stuff. My parents are also devout Republicans, still live in Sac.
Yeah.
And for folks like us, the last couple of years have been kind of hard.
Yeah.
And it's been very divisive, and a lot of bad things have been said by both sides. And one of the things that's helped me frame our national discussion is the fact that these people that I know and love and trust feel very differently than I do about a lot of these things. And it makes me step back and look at some of these issues. And I can't just lob these horrible derogatory terms at Republicans, because that's my dad. I love that man. That's my mom. I respect her. I can't do that. And so it's really made me look at some of these things. And I like the fact that your parents don't agree with you, and that your dad went out and said, well, I normally vote Republican, but for this kid, I suppose I'll vote Democrat.
It's true.
I think that's a good thing. I think that's going to help you frame some of these big problems because you've got that check and balance. You've got your dad, man, he wiped your butt when you were little. He's going to tell you when he thinks you're wrong.
That's right.
And I think that's going to be very good. So I like that about you. So good luck.
Thank you.
bet.
Thank you. I'll see you out there in Sac City. How you doing?
Good. So,
And what's your name?
Jack.
Jack. Welcome, Jack.
Yeah, thanks. So, my question for you is, actually, real quick. So, you talked a lot about how Americans deserve the freedom to dream.
Yep.
And I agree with it. Completely.
And I don't say deserve like you've earned it. Like deserve, I think sounds paternalistic. Like you earn the freedom to dream.
Okay.
Because you work hard.
Well, I agree with it. I still agree with it. But I was raised very differently by two conservative Christians, super far right.
Yeah.
So I was raised to believe that it's not your place to have how would you say for the government to help you out. Basically, you got to make the most of your situation that you're in. So my question for you is very fundamental in the sense of why do you believe that the government should step in and should help people with a lot of the issues that you mentioned?
Yeah. What I believe is that we all have an individual responsibility to seek skills, take care of our families, love each other, but we should have an expectation that capitalism works on every floor of every building. And what I see today is it's largely confined to the top floors. So you see that wages are flat. The cost of healthcare keeps going up, but healthcare CEOs are making $30 million a year. You're seeing that 80% of us are living paycheck to paycheck. So I don't think most Americans want socialism. And I hear that set up. It's capitalism versus socialism. I think if you're somebody who has to work overtime just to make ends meet and just to have savings and just to be able to have a retirement that you can count on, and you're just running in place, you're not asking for socialism. What you're asking for is something where my hard work adds up. And that's what I want. And so I think capitalism with reforms, with reinvestment for the communities that have been forgotten, and rebuilding in many places that need to be modernized, that can be a path forward. But I believe in personal responsibility. And as the economy goes toward automation and artificial intelligence, it's on our 2-year-old. He's going to have an agility of skills unlike what I had and what my parents had. I joked to my wife, he's going to have to be a chemist and a doctor and an engineer and, God forbid, maybe even a lawyer. But the economy will change so fast that you have to take personal responsibility to change with it. But I think companies that are automating and displacing workers also have a responsibility to invest in the retraining of the workforce. Otherwise, the social cost is massive unemployment.
All right,
it's a great question. Thanks, Jack.
Yeah.
Yep. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. What's your name?
Jeff.
Jeff. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Iowa has a lot less gun control than California.
Say it again?
Iowa has a lot less gun control
Yeah,
than California.
yeah.
And we also have a far lower murder rate.
Yep.
How do you plan on convincing Iowans to go with your gun control plans?
Yeah. So one, California is much larger, just by population. But
It's a rate, so it's adjusted for population.
So a state is only as safe as the states around it. So if in California, for example, when I was a prosecutor, I saw that so many times the guns that were taken off the streets of Oakland were originally purchased in Arizona or Nevada that have looser background check restrictions. So you could be a private seller and a private buyer transaction and not go through a background check. You could have an online sale or go to a gun show in those states and not have to go through a background check. So you're really only as safe as the states that are around you. But a stat that I'd rather have you look at is that the United States has violent video games. We have mental health crisis. We have violent movies. But so do most of the rest of the world. You go to Japan or China, they've got a video game culture. Their movies are just as violent. They have mental health challenges. But we have 25% more gun violence deaths than the next country in the world. And the only difference between us and the next country is our access to guns. So what I'm proposing is that if you're going to buy a gun, no matter if it's private seller to private buyer, at a gun show or at a gun dealer who already has to do this, you should go through a background check. Keep your pistols, keep your rifles, keep your shotguns. I like to shoot. I took veterans shooting 2 weeks ago in my district at a shooting range. Don't have a problem with shooting for sport or going out with your dad to hunt or having a shotgun because that might beat the police response if someone comes into your home. But I have seen in my job as a prosecutor that an assault weapon is a lot different than those weapons. When you put a pistol grip on a long rifle and the velocity and energy of that round, it doesn't leave much of a chance of survival. I think every day of a young man named Gary Jackson. I prosecuted his murderer. Gary was fired at with 40 rounds from a 4-story apartment building. Gary was on the street and he was hit just once. The guy just sprayed Gary indiscriminately with an assault rifle, hit in the back of the thigh. And Gary's mom asked me right before we went on the witness stand so she could identify Gary. She said, "I don't get it. You would think if you were going to get shot, you would hope to get shot in the arm or the leg. But the pathologist, the person who did the autopsy, and the ballistics expert told the jury that with a long rifle and the round that it had and a pistol grip, firing 40 rounds, just hitting him once, didn't really matter where he was going to get hit. He probably wasn't going to stand a chance. That's why I want to ban and buy back assault rifles. I think those weapons are different than pistols, shotguns, and long rifles, and I want to protect every kid, every theater goer, every concert goer, every worshiper at a church from a mass shooter leaving them with no chance. Yeah.
So are you saying it's the strength of the round is the problem?
Say it again?
Are you saying the strength of the round is the problem?
The strength of the round so when you have a long rifle with a pistol grip, semi-automatic long rifle with a pistol grip, you can spray indiscriminately. If you have a long rifle without a pistol grip, it takes a lot longer for the strength of that round. But there's also pistols or handguns that, whether it's a barrel shroud or a flash suppressor, have assault weapon features that allow them to cause more havoc. I just think, what the heck can that gun do to help you hunt better? What can that gun do to help you shoot for sport better? Those guns are made strictly to kill people. Those guns belong on our battlefields, not in our schools. That's the difference. I'll happily talk with you after, too. If you'd like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just before we get to the next question, if you are a student and you need to leave, you are excused. We take a quick second to letting students need to go because we know that there's another event that's going on in the building tonight. Also, I just want to make the announcement that after we do the questions and you stick around, you're going to Torrent tonight, correct?
Yes.
So if you imbibe,
Politics and
legal,
pub, right?
Yes. So
For those able.
downtown. So if you want to join us there later as well tonight.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and I'm a student in chemical engineering. My question.
What year are you, Rachel?
I'm a sophomore.
Cool. Are you from Iowa?
Yes, I'm from Ames. My question is a little bit about your blended cabinet approach.
Yeah.
I personally have never seen the GOP really reaching across the aisle. It's something that's championed mainly by Democrats. And what I don't understand is why those positions would be given to Republicans instead of kind of very competent, hardworking Democrats that deserve that spot. It might show that our party has a weakness in areas of security or defense in which conservatives would typically be appointed. So I would like for you to defend that choice and why you think that conservatives in the cabinet would be the best for our country.
That's a great question. And no one's going to, accuse me of being a conservative Democrat. I think if you look at my record, I'm quite progressive. But I recognize where we are right now as a country. We're so divided. And we're told we're supposed to be enemies of each other. And we've had our democracy just broken apart by this president who doesn't respect the rule of law, doesn't respect things that aren't written into law, but I call it the honor code, like the independence of the Department of Justice, not insulting, judges, making sure you turn over your taxes so we know, what your financial exposure is. He doesn't respect any of that. And if we want to make sure this never happens again for future generations, I think on day one we're going to have to make reforms to our democracy. After Watergate, they had what was called the Church Committee to look at all the intelligence community abuses that Nixon had been committing. They put in place campaign finance reform because of the way that campaigns were financed back then. It was for the health and sake of our democracy. So I know it won't be easy. I mean, it'll be, I think practically as a president, it could be messy, but I want credibility with voters who didn't vote for me. I want this country to come back together. I want a president when he or she sees loss, seeks to heal. When he or she sees destruction, seeks to build. And when he or she sees division, seeks to unite. And I think that'll take a blended cabinet to lead the country forward. And I'm ready to do it. And I know it's not going to be easy, but I think it's for the best of our country.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great question. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Diana Swartz. I work in the manufacturing. I am a assembler for a major company in Iowa. My question is, and I'm a proud union member.
Which union, Diana?
What?
Which union?
The UAW.
Oh, good.
Anyway, my question is, I know someone asked you about the rural area, but I really think you need to concentrate on like people in the like blue collar workers. I mean, I work with a lot of guys and they voted for Trump.
Yep.
And, you've got to really come in and try to, so I'm asking you how you're going to try to lure those people back, because that's, the unions were always big Democrats, and I mean strong Democrats, and that's, my husband's been a union member. I've only been a union member for a year, just a little over a year, so I'm pretty proud of it. So I really am worried, because I think the union is slipping more toward the Republican side. So how are you going to try to lure them back?
Yeah. I won't dismiss them first. And what I mean by that is we can dismiss the person who promised them that the country would be great, they wouldn't be forgotten, healthcare costs would go down, wages would go up. We can dismiss that person, but we can't dismiss the people who were counting on that. I spoke to the Building Trades Convention yesterday, and we had all the international presidents, from the laborers to the Teamsters to the iron workers. And I told them, I said, I would be honored to have your endorsement as a union, from the union presidents. But more importantly and more practically, to your point, Diana, I want their members' votes, because we're losing their members' votes. And as someone who grew up in a family where we lived paycheck to paycheck, where I went to 11 schools before I graduated, where I lived in 11 houses and went to 9 schools before I graduated, I know why people work hard. I know what they expect it to add up to. And I can be a president who makes sure that they're not going to lose a paycheck, safety guarantee, or benefit in their retirement. That I would invest and make sure that we had local hire requirements as we rebuilt our country. That I would repeal the Cadillac tax, which makes their healthcare costs too much. So seeing them, hearing them, and being for them is how I'm going to bring our brothers and sisters in the unions back to us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Donna. Thank you. Sir, haven't seen you since a snowy night with Senator Klobuchar is the last time
Yes,
we were together.
I've actually been to practically every event by every Democratic candidate in the state.
I'm sorry.
Hey, they pay for my food, so I'm not going to complain. I'm actually here to relay a message from a friend of your father's, who, when I was actually, last time I was at an event, she found out that I talked to you from time to time, and she just got really, really excited because of when she was a teacher in Algona. Your father, there was an issue, and your father helped her with a person who was causing her a lot of problems, and I have her information. She really wanted me to let you know how awesome your father was, and that she remembers you from when you were little, and that she's actually really excited that you're running, and she can't wait to support you.
That's great.
The next thing I want to comment on is that even though no one here knows when, but I am really for sure you're going to be president of the United States sooner or later. Will you build your presidential library in Iowa?
I can't think of a better place than next to the world's largest popcorn ball, right?
But my policy questions, we'll have plenty of time to talk, but these people have a lot of other things to ask you, but thank you for coming back home.
Yeah, thank you. Can I tell you just a quick story about my dad? It was my first memory. I was about 5 years old, and I remember my mom and dad fretting and worrying about my dad being fired. And the reason I remember it is because I just kept hearing the word fire and my dad, and I didn't know what it meant. I thought like my dad was going into a fire. Like that's what I remember. And I later learned when I got older that my dad is the police chief of Algona, had come in and really cleaned up some of the corruption in town. The DUIs went from 4 the year before he got there to 40 in his first year, and it wasn't because they developed a drinking problem over having a new chief. He just enforced the law. And it reached this breaking point where the Kossuth County Fair was happening, and a couple council members and the mayor parked in the fire lane, And the fire chief called my dad and said, what am I supposed to do? They won't move. And my dad, I could just hear him saying this, said, no one's above the law. You got to ticket and tow them if they don't move. So he ticketed and towed them. And at the next council meeting, in front of everyone in a room like this, the mayor told my dad, if you don't undo those tickets, you're going to be fired. And my dad would not budge. Didn't undo the tickets. That's the reason I didn't go to Algona High School. That's the reason I probably didn't go to Iowa State. We left, we went west, but whether it's the mayor of Algona, Iowa, or his son in Congress saying it's the president of the United States, I just believe nobody is above the law. And I learned that lesson at age 5 here in Iowa.
She commented about how your dad did so much work, and she really wanted to send a message. I have it. I'll make sure you get it. But she really wanted to make sure everyone else knew that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You shouldn't need to be above the law.
That's right. That's right. Especially a president. Yeah. How you doing?
Hi, my name is Maria. I'm
Hi,
originally
Maria.
from Afghanistan. I went to Iowa State. I graduated like 2 years ago. So I'm a microbiologist at Iowa State Veterinary Diagnostics Lab. My question was really related to war in Afghanistan because a lot of people believe that a lot of money is wasted on a never-ending war. But I believe that the moment the troops are taken out of Afghanistan, it's going to fall back in Taliban's hand.
Yeah.
So if you were to become the president, what do you think the U.S.'s rule is going to be? Like, what is the strategy going to be in ending the war?
First thing I would do is ask Congress to update the authorization of use of military force. Hasn't been updated since 2001. And Congress and the president, should be aligned on what I call the 3 T's. The time, how long are we going to be there? The terrain covered, is it just Afghanistan, or are we using those authorities to cover, other acts or other armies that we'd be going after? And what troops would be committed there? Is it U.S. troops? Are we doing it with NATO? Is the Afghan army expected to be there? But I would reduce our presence there to just a training presence, to be Shana al-Shana, as they would say in Afghanistan, shoulder to shoulder, not U.S. troops leading the fight. I've been there a couple times now to visit our troops, and I took as my State of the Union guest a couple years ago an interpreter who had served alongside with U.S. forces. His father was kidnapped by the Taliban, killed because he couldn't get there in time, still served with our troops. His little brother was kidnapped, and he had to take all of his savings and put it on his father's grave to get his 3-year-old brother back. And I've been working on his family's visa case ever since. So I know this issue very well. Little Kabul is in my district in Fremont, California. But I want peace for the Afghan people. I want our troops, as much as they can, to come home. And I don't want to see ever again Afghanistan or any country a place where you could plan and launch a terrorist attack against the United States.
And it has been 7 years since I haven't seen my family because
They're over in Kabul?
they're in Mazar Sharif.
Okay. Well, I'd be happy to talk to you about any of the visa issues too afterwards. Thank you. How you doing,
Good
sir?
evening, Congressman.
How are you? Call me Eric, please. I only ask my little brothers to call me Congressman. They should show respect.
My name is Robin.
Hi, Robin.
And I wanted to ask you about how you would go about addressing the relationship of the Israelis and the Palestinians. Israelis have been occupying the West Bank for more than 50 years. And they've turned Gaza into a huge concentration camp.
Yeah.
And the United States, most candidates who speak about this, and not many of them do, unless asked, will say, well, we have a special relationship and we share the same values. And, I see the pictures of Israeli snipers shooting children and nurses and journalists. And and harassing people in the West Bank, breaking into their homes at night, and so on. And the United States continues to support them financially, militarily. We're up to $3.8 billion a year now. So, and for a while there, you know, the government claimed that we were trying to be an honest broker in bringing peace and some semblance of justice. And all those years and all that effort have failed. So I wonder, you know, broadly speaking, how would you be different in addressing this? And then more specifically, I wonder if you might consider this money that we give annually, if you would consider putting that in escrow until the Israelis and the Palestinians can come to some amicable terms and there's some semblance of justice involved there.
What I would do on this issue, and I care about this issue a lot, is bring leadership where there's only been showmanship. I've been to Ramallah, I've been to Bethlehem, I've been to Jericho, I've been in the Palestinian areas. And what they need is economic opportunity. They have the same land as the Israeli people. The conditions are not any different, but you see one country that economically thrives, and then a people who are suffering. So the first thing I would do is immediately restore the funding to the Palestinian people that the Trump administration just took away. I would support the UN commission that the US just pulled out of that was also monitoring the conditions for the Palestinian people. On leadership, I'd fire Jared Kushner. He's not going to be on this problem set anymore. I wouldn't give Israel, I would not have acknowledged Jerusalem is the capital of Israel and moved our embassy there until that would have had to have been a part of a two-state solution. And we have right now a prime minister who it looks like was just reelected there, who I do not believe faithfully is moving toward a two-state solution. And I will be honest with our friends, and you're right, Israel is a friend. They're a democracy in the Middle East. They're an economy that where for Palestinians who can come into it are able to work. But they have a leader right now that I do not believe is serious about a two-state solution, and I think it takes an American president who is to make sure that that happens, and I would be that president.
How would you manage a two-state solution given all of the Israeli settlements that are in the West Bank, the private highways that cannot be used, the farmland that is olive groves that are burned? How would you do that?
Yeah, I oppose settlements. I don't think there should be any geographical changes on either side until there is a two-state solution. No settlements, no more acknowledgement of land by the United States until there is that two-state solution. I will also say the challenge the Israeli people face, but I don't believe this is why Netanyahu is not able to get a deal. But the challenge is that you have Hamas, who is, I think, incapable of negotiating on behalf of the Palestinian people, and the PLA, which if they were to hold elections in the West Bank today, would probably lose an election to Hamas. So you have a very fractured side among the Palestinian people, which I think makes it hard to get that two-state solution. But I believe if you economically invested there the way that we're economically investing in Israel, that you could stand up leadership on the Palestinian side. But that takes an American president who wants to roll up their sleeves and do something rather than just try and make this a campaign issue. Thank you for caring about it so much.
More later.
Thank you. How you doing?
My name's Tyler.
Hey, Tyler.
I'm a junior here, I think. Yeah.
Where are you from?
Des Moines.
Des Moines. We should check on that status. Make sure.
Yeah.
You may be graduating in a couple of weeks.
So, my question is, as President of the United States, what would your opinion on net neutrality and the Article 13 of the European Union Directive on Copyright and the Digital Single Market be?
I just voted yesterday in Washington for net neutrality. I believe in a free and open internet without throttling or being charged more because the biggest providers are able to squeeze out the small guys. And it's actually, those big providers, by the way, at one point they were the little guy or the little girl in the garage, and they should recognize that. So I support that. As far as I'm more familiar with what Europe has done on having privacy standards, and I would seek to have a national privacy law that would bring more transparency and awareness as to how your data is being used and what you should know before you have it taken from you or used, as someone pointed out, back against you and targeting and unnecessarily being advertised to.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
That was the last question. So
Well,
you're going to stick around for about
yes,
30 minutes
I'm gonna
and
stick
do
around.
meet and greet, talk to people individually,
And we're going to Torrent.
and then go into Torrent.
Brewery after this. So I just want to again thank Iowa State for hosting me here, my first visit in Iowa since announcing our campaign for the presidency. Again, I just want our organizers and my team to raise their hand, because I hope you'll sign up with us. I hope you'll join us and bring more Iowans into this. And I just deeply believe that because of what we did in the midterms, the sun is beginning to rise again in the United States. I want you to work with me in that spirit of who we have always been as a country, to go big on the issues we take on, be bold with the solutions we offer, and just be good in the way we treat each other and the way we govern. Thank you so much, Ames.
Thank you, Eric.